So how many times have you heard this term, why can't this be copied? If you are an entrepreneur, if you keep on pitching to investors, if you go and go for pitching, go and talk to investors or go to demo days, how many times have you heard this particular thing? Why can't what you're building, why can't it be copied, why can't this be copied? In fact, why can't somebody else do it better than you? I can assure you, I can guarantee you, you would have heard this particular term a lot of times from investors, from incubators, and from people who are kind of pitching, whom in front of whom you're pitching. You would heard these statements coming. And let us understand why this question is being asked from all of you. Why do investors ask this question? It's because generally, in my experience, I have seen that whenever I talk to startup founders, whenever I talk to entrepreneurs, when I'm on the other side of the table, when I'm listening to their pitches, their general claim is that what they're doing is slightly better, right? Or maybe what they're doing is 10% better. Startup founders typically are not able to convince investors, are not able to convince the incubator managers, not able to convince the jury members that what they are doing or what they're trying to do is significantly better and disruptive than what anybody else is doing out there. So if you are one of those, if you're somebody who has faced this problem, faced this issue, tonight I'm going to solve this issue for all of you, right? So see, so to disrupt or to convince somebody that nobody else can copy and replicate what you're trying to do, you have to do something better than others. You have to do it in a tech 10x manner. You have to do it in a 10x better manner, or you can also do it in a format of delta 4, right? Where the efficiency of the system is 4 times than the previous state, right? So I'll of course not go into the 10x theory, and I'll also not go into the delta 4 theory, for a very simple reason. These are the independent theories. You can search online, you can search on the internet. And of course, delta 4 theory is very famously it's been created by Kunal Shah. And you can go and look at this theory, right? But today, in today's session, what we're going to do is I'm going to primarily cover two broad topics: unfair advantage and defensibility. And if you are a startup founder, I can assure you both of these things, both of these terminologies, both of these learnings will help you to create an edge in your business over your competition. Because understand, there are only two problems generally a startup founder encounters. One problem is that why can't somebody else copy it, or why can't somebody else what you're doing can do it better than you? And of course, how will you stop the second or the third or the fourth guy entering into the market? How will you stop that guy from copying what you are exactly doing at this point in time, right? So tonight I'm going to try and give you almost all the possible answers to all of these questions, so that you understand how you can apply unfair advantage and defensibility for your startup, for your product, for your business, right? So the term unfair advantage generally, and I can assure you, all of those who are startup founders here, the term unfair advantage, typically you would have encountered this term first time in your life when you're filling the lean model canvas. There is a box of unfair advantage in the lean model canvas, and can assure you a lot of you guys would have encountered this term there. Now, if you look closely, if you look really, really closely, unfair advantage is something that cannot be easily bought or copied, right? Something that cannot be easily bought or copied, and that is what an unfair advantage is. And therefore it becomes further more difficult for anybody. It becomes further more difficult for a startup founder to figure it out on day one, because generally what I've seen, that unfair advantage happens over time. On day one, even if you claim that this is your unfair advantage, it is not practically correct, and there are ways it can be countered, right? So something that cannot be easily bought or copied is your unfair advantage. So there are in general two types of advantages, and see, life is unfair, right? So there are in general two types of advantages. One is fair advantage, which is kind of obvious, and another is going to be unfair advantage. And stay with me so that I can help and explain and really, really go deep with all of you into these terminologies, right? So in general, what is an advantage? You as a human being, you as a person, or maybe you as an entrepreneur has certain advantages over others, right? Your thought is an advantage, your experience, your gifts, and your skills are an advantage. But unfair advantage is your talent. It's your background that very few, extremely rare people have, or maybe it is something that cannot be replicated or copied by others, right? So unfair advantage is like a, very simply put, competitive upper hand. Unfair advantage is something that basically puts you in a position where nobody else can challenge your authority. Let me show a few very interesting examples to you. So let's first finish this part, and I'll tell you a few very interesting examples. So unfair advantage, as said, is not just the strength but also circumstances. So unfair advantage is not something that you can gain or you can simply build. It is something which is a lot of times circumstantial as well. So let's look at few examples, right? The tallest basketball player, right? If you are a tall guy, and forget the skill set this guy has, forget the other speed this guy has, there are other things that can be developed. But in general, when you're playing basketball as a game, you being tall is an unfair advantage, right? If you are a 8 feet 4 inches tall guy, you have in general an unfair advantage over short players if you're playing a basketball. Let me show you another slide with a very interesting joke, right? This is an unfair advantage, right? If you are running a race, but if you have a head start over others into something like this, what you see on the screen, this is also an unfair advantage, right? So as I said, unfair advantage is something that puts you ahead of the curve in general and gives you a very, very, very strong competitive upper hand than other people, right? So just like SWOT, uh, and give me a second, folks. Yeah, I can. Okay, I've just checked the sound. I think it's completely fine. All right. Okay. So just like SWOT, and I'm not sure how many of you watched my one of the episodes where I did the validation, idea validation techniques thing. But if you have not built SWOT, just like SWOT can be done for both personal and business level, I can assure you unfair advantage can also be done for both business and personal level. And it will be really great if you as an entrepreneur are also able to recognize your own unfair advantage, because as I said, it will give you a severe competitive edge over others, right? So let's first of all talk about something which is personal unfair advantage, and how can you create a framework so that you are able to figure out what is your personal unfair advantage, right? So let's talk about that. So to understand unfair advantage, let us look at something which is called as Miles framework, and it is the framework which has been created by these two gentlemen, Ash Ali and Hassan Kuba. I'll to kind of make you see it very clearly. Let me increase the screen size so that you can see it very clearly. So the typical Miles framework comprises of five big pillars. It is money and mindset, it is intellect and insight, it is location and luck, it is education, and it is also social status. So these are the five things that are the component of Miles framework. So if I really go deep into Miles framework, and if I really start and I try and understand what is exactly the Miles framework, these are the elaboration of what a typical Miles framework would be like, right? So when we talk about money, if in general you have more money than the other person, you have an unfair advantage. Money, funding, access to capital is an unfair advantage. So if you have some sort of a money, you have unfair advantage. Intelligence and insights, if you are somebody who's got more insights into a space, if you have got more intelligence over others, if you are a person with higher IQ or more intellect, you by default have an unfair advantage over the other people. Luck and location, most important. You cannot create luck, and to be in the right place at the right time is also very critical. You can't do that. So luck and location also creates an unfair advantage. Education and expertise also creates a lot of unfair advantage. What do I mean by education and expertise? Very simply put, education and expertise is basically when you uh, pass out of a premium institute, or you bring a badge with you or a degree with you which is of very, very high value. And last but not the least is the status, right? When you have a certain cultural, social, political status that makes you influential. So these five components together create an unfair advantage for you. Now let us talk about these independent point and individual points from the business point of view, and that is where the game makes or breaks, and this is what you need to understand from the startup perspective or startup point of view. So number one, imagine if you have millions of dollars of funding. Imagine if you have, or maybe when you're building a startup, imagine your parents have lakhs and couple of millions of rupees, and they're able to fund your company on day one. Or imagine you have certain amount of money through which you can mitigate the risk, or you can burn the cash to validate your idea. In all such cases, you have an unfair advantage by default over somebody who does not have that amount of money. Therefore, a lot of times people say that only do a startup when you have certain sort of savings available, because money gives an unfair advantage. If you are coming from a background, if you're coming from a family where your parents are wealthy, where you are wealthy, where you don't have dearth of money to spend on validation of the idea or building the product, you are, my friends, are by default in a better space, right? Look at a very simple example of Geo, right? When Geo came into the market, they had so much of money that they literally went out there and disrupted the entire telecom ecosystem, right? So money becomes very, very, very critical component. Intellectual and or insights, right? You are in general smarter than the next person, right? So how does it help you? Look at a few smarter startup founders. You can look at the startup founders of Stripe, or even you can look at Larry Page and Sergey Brin, right? So what these guys do, when they started Google, they were already in Stanford and they were already doing some sort of a PhD. So they were by default smarter than the other folks trying to get into the intellectual or the search engine game. And of all of us know the Google story. Google was not started as a search engine. It was more of a ranking system, right? So if you are in general smarter than other, you have an unfair advantage over others. Most important, luck plus location. You need to be at the right place at the right time. The best example of this particular thing is Facebook. And I can totally guarantee, I can tell you that Mark Zuckerberg is in fact one of the most luckiest man on the planet. I'll give you a very simple example. He hailed from a great family. I think his parents were pretty, they had some sort of a money. I think they were doctors or surgeons, something like that. He went to Harvard. He had great connections. He was backed by Peter Thiel. He was by default in Silicon Valley or areas nearby. So he had great luck. He was in the great location. And also, most importantly, the biggest boost to Facebook was when Facebook came to India and the broadband penetration was on the peak. And I've spoken about this a few times earlier as well. So the point is, if you are into a right location, if you have the right luck, I think that becomes an unfair advantage for you as a business, right? Of course, education degree. All of us have seen that in general, guys from prestigious institutes like IITs and IIMs and MITs and Stanfords and Harvards of the world get preference. And there's a reason, because once they get that degree, the overall image around that degree is that these guys are somebody who are more reliable, and that reliability is a factor, that accountability, that trustworthiness as a factor becomes an unfair advantage for them or over other guys. And last but not the least, which is most important, I've already spoken about it, social status. If you are a well connected influential person, right? Somebody like Elon Musk, or let me give an example in terms of Indian context, as simple as Kunal Shah. We might go out there and complain that why Kunal Shah was able to raise $20 million without even creating a product, but he has already proved himself, right? So uh, just a second, guys. Yeah. So basically, social status also acts as an unfair advantage. Now, don't get disheartened when I say all of these things, because you can always, and there's a framework, you can always go out there and convert an unfair advantage into your own favor, right? And that is how, and let's look at that. So, what are the most common? Sorry, my bad. I think, yeah, sorry, I think I missed the slide there. So, how can you convert unfair advantage in your favor, or if you are on the other side of the table, how can you convert it in your favor. So if you have no money, it in generally gives you an edge to be creative, right? If you don't have money, you by default are tend to be creative, and therefore it you can always overcome the barrier of not having enough money. If you are not highly intellectual, in fact that's the best example of Amazon, right? If you are not highly intellectual, you can always go and hire better people or highly intellectual people, right? So as a startup founder, the smartest thing you can do is go and hire better people than you. So you can always go and hire better people. You're not lucky enough, there's a possibility, but luck is a factor of connections, network, exploration, and you can always build your own luck. Of course something disruptive might not happen, but overall if you look at the factor of luck, with time the luck compounds. So therefore if you explore, build enough connections, and go out there in the market and start meeting more people, do better networking, do better connections, build better connections, you will be able to create a lot more luck for yourself, right? You don't have a fancy degree, but I think if you are able to somehow prove yourself, there's a possibility that you can always go out there and learn new things and show an edge over others. So you may not need a fancy degree in general, right? And last but not the least, but the most important thing, if you are not socially influential, you can always build connections or you can prove yourself. I've already given the example of Kunal Shah. So if you again look back at Kunal Shah, although he was able to raise $20 million just an idea stage for cred, Kunal Shah, when he started his first company, he did not come from any influential family, right? He was just another normal guy, not even an engineer, right? So he was able to prove himself over the years, and therefore he was able to create both that influence and luck for himself, that anybody was willing to fund his company, right? So as I said, just like for your personal thing, for your business in general, it's difficult to have unfair advantage on day one. But you, my friends, can always go out there and build an unfair advantage for your business. And as I said, it becomes absolutely important for all of you to build an unfair advantage for a very simple reason, that investors would ask you that why cannot somebody else copy it, and if you have an unfair advantage over others, and I will give you a few examples from the business point of view, how can you go out there and build your unfair advantage. Now before I jump into the second business part of the entire understanding from the unfair advantage point of view, I have a very simple request from all of you who are watching me tonight. Just make sure you like the video, and also if you haven't subscribed, subscribe to the channel, because this will help me in propagating this video to a better and a further audience, because YouTube algorithm works that way. So make sure you like the video and you also subscribe to the channel, right? So as we've already seen, this is the block that you need to fill, but as a startup on day one it will be difficult for you to fill this block, because as I said, unfair advantage in general is built over time, and on day one there's a possibility you might not know what your unfair advantage is, right? So let us look at a few examples of how unfair advantage can be built over time, and why it is not necessary, or it is not necessary for you to be the first player in the market. A lot of times people say that being first to the market is an unfair advantage, but that is not the case. And the point I'm trying to make here is, when I say on day one it is difficult to build an unfair advantage, but you can only build unfair advantage over a period of time. Let me give you the first example, or let me talk about the first example for of Facebook, right? Give me a second, folks, and then we'll continue. All right. So imagine when Facebook started, Facebook was not the first search engine, and all of us know this. But today, it is difficult for all of us to leave the Facebook ecosystem, right? You, no matter who you are, if you are somebody on social media, you cannot leave the Facebook ecosystem for a very simple point of view, that number one, everybody's on Facebook. In fact, technically, half the population of the world, 3.5 billion people, are on Facebook. So if you are an advertiser, if you are somebody who wants to build your business or run your ads or anything like that, you will have to be on Facebook, and then the connected ecosystem, which is Instagram and of course the WhatsApp, right? So but the Facebook, as we all know, was not the first search engine. So that then what happens? So therefore Facebook was able to build an unfair advantage of having the biggest community, the biggest network over time. So no, so although it was not the first search engine, but today You cannot beat Facebook. Today, if you go and tell somebody that I want to create another social media platform, it will be absolutely really difficult for you. So Facebook is a great example of how to build an unfair advantage, and how can an unfair advantage be built over a period of time. Let us look at another exciting example: Google. All of us know Google, all of us have seen Google. But again, Google was not the first search engine, and we all know that, right? So Google was in fact the fourth or the fifth or maybe the 10th search engine, right? But today, you cannot compete with Google. Google today in 2021 occupies 20 sorry occupies 96% of the market share for organic and in general search traffic. And yeah, and you cannot compete with Google, and you cannot build another search engine. So the power of Google is technology. So they have definitely a competitive upper hand over everybody else. Even a company like Microsoft, which is another technology giant, could not create a search engine, right? So Google has an unfair advantage over there. So the point I'm trying to make is, if you look at all of these case studies, if you look at all of these examples, all of these case studies will give you a lot of knowledge, lot of information, lot of insights, so that you can create or find a framework through which you can create unfair advantage for your business, right? And if you are a startup, if you are somebody who wants to build your own business, these unfair advantages will help you to get a competitive upper hand, both with the tech giants and also with somebody who's trying to now come and disrupt your business, right? So let's look at a couple of key factors which you can build an unfair advantage around, and also create an entry barrier. These are the key factors all of us need to understand, so that you can create an unfair advantage for your business. And now, my friends, let me start breaking each of these factors for, like, individually for all of you. And of course, if you have any questions, please make sure you start asking your questions in the chat, so that I can start answering them for all of you. All right. So now, number one example, the best example, or the first key factor, which will give you an unfair advantage or give you a competitive upper hand, is technology. If you are somehow able to build a technology which gives you an edge over others, you are in safe space. Nobody else can come and touch you. And of course, it will happen with time. But the best example for that particular thing is Google, right? Google today is, as I said, occupies 96% of the market share. Nobody else can compete with the technology Google has created. And once you have the technology supremacy, you can always go and create parallel products. So Google's main core business or core offering is the free search engine, but then you have Google Drive, and you have Google Mail, and you have Google Calendar, and entire suite of services around it. And in fact, that is where Google starts making money. And of course, the Google ads is another thing, right? So technology supremacy, if you are somehow able to create a product which is technically superior than other people, you have an unfair advantage. Another example is funding, or money, or the capital you bring on the table. The best example for that is Flipkart, right? Building a business, building a company which delivers books or delivers product to people, or e-commerce, it is not rocket science. But today you cannot compete with Flipkart, or rather technically Amazon, right? For a very simple reason: because the kind of money power, the kind of capital power they bring on the table, you will not survive in front of them. And for a very simple reason, and if I talk in Indian context, Flipkart has technically sucked out the entire money, entire technically venture capital funding, venture capital money from the market, which is available for generic e-commerce funding, right? So Flipkart took away all the money. So no matter, even if you're building a better technology company, if you're able to build, if you want to build a better company than Flipkart, you cannot build that company, build that product, until unless it's a total disruptor, or until unless you're not somebody like Ambani, or you're not building Geomart. If you are if you do not bring in that level of capital from your own side, it will be very, very, very difficult for you to build a company like Flipkart in the generic e-commerce space. And of course, I have already spoken about how can you build e-commerce in 2021. We did a video, I did a AMA session where I spoke about, it was called business ideas for 2021. Go and watch that later on, and make sure you also like that video, because in that video I spoke about how can you as a business owner think of building a niche e-commerce business, which is the need and the demand for 2021, right? But as I said, for generic e-commerce business, you cannot compete with Flipkart because all the money has been sucked. So funding gives you a very, very high competitive edge, and funding is the perfect unfair advantage. Whether you bring in your own capital, whether your parents fund you, whether you have your own money, or some big investors going to fund you, if you have the power of funding, you have an unfair advantage, right? And this is one of the reasons why everybody wants to raise money, right? Another unfair advantage is operations of scale. You can build a better app than Uber. You can also build a better app than Oyo. In fact, Uber and Oyo, in fact, let me talk about Oyo. Oyo is not the technologically superior product or the best technical product out there. But operations of scale is another unfair advantage. Imagine what is the USP, or what is the best part. Let me not use the word USP because there's nothing called unique selling point anymore, and it's a different discussion altogether. But what is that one critical factor that people use Uber? You know, the critical factor is that the reason why people use Uber is because no matter where you are, you will get a cab in 10 minutes. This is what you call as the operations of operations, sorry, scale of operations, or maybe the power of network, right? So you have Oyos everywhere, you have Uber everywhere. Within 10 minutes, the moment you book a cab, within 10 minutes you will get a cab. Imagine if this uh, imagine if you would get a cab in like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, or you have to wait for that much amount of time. Your entire experience would go down the drain, and you will not want to use the Uber app again, right? So the scalability or the network effect is something which is of unfair advantage. And of course, Uber was able to build this for a very simple reason, because Uber had the money. But even other than the money, if you are not able to build that scale or that network, you will not have an unfair advantage. So scale, network is another unfair advantage that you can as a business build, right? Another, and the most important, is time, right? I know looks like little cliched, and I said you will not be able to build in a lot of cases unfair advantage of day one, but with time you'll be able to build that. Infosys and TCS are a great example of unfair advantage over time. You cannot build a company like Infosys or TCS anymore. The amount of time they've spent in the market, the amount of time they've already spent in the ecosystem, right? The kind of companies they are, they've spent enough time in the market capturing the right clients, building the right ecosystem, so now nobody else can come and disrupt this. These are the perfect examples of how time can be an unfair advantage, right? And last, or maybe second last but not least, connections and your network, right? If you have certain connections, let us say if you come from a influential family, if you are already well connected, if you also maybe know the people in that particular sector or anything else, connections and networks also will give you an unfair advantage. And maybe this is one of the reasons why a lot of people who go into job are able to somehow become better entrepreneurs generally, because they have got certain connections. And this holds true primarily when it is about B2B businesses. If you come from a sector or an industry where you have worked, where you have been able to identify a gap at a closer level, and where you know the industry inside out, you will be able to fill a better product or a better service to fill that gap. And therefore connections and network matters a lot. And in fact, this is one of the reasons I tell all the students who follow me, and in fact student entrepreneurs, that if you are building a tech product or even a product which needs mass consumers, college is the best time to build a company. And this is the reason why I keep on telling them, because as a student, they have an unfair advantage of being a student. Today, I as a professional cannot go to a college and demand attention of the student, or there's no connection with them, right? But if you are in a college, you can always go and talk to your peer networks. If you're in a college, you would have 100, sorry, you would have 500 to 1000 people accessible to you. If you are in a university, you will easily be able to access 5000 to 10,000 people based on in what university you are studying. So connection and network is a very, very, very critical aspect of building an unfair advantage. And last but not the least, patent and IP. Any sort of barrier that you create, and this particular patent and IP holds true when you are either in a space which is more like a med tech, or a pharma industry, or some industry with the patent and the IP uh, is the core of the product and the offering, or core of the innovation. And let me spend a few minutes and explain this to you. So if you are into, let us say, technical sector, if you are uh, into services business, patent and IP might not help you too much, because it will be because your core delivery, your core offering is not driven by patent or IP, right? But if you are an innovation company, if you're somebody like Apple, if you're somebody like Pfizer, if you're somebody like Bharat Serum Institute, whatever that institute, Serum Institute of India, right? Then in that case, patent, IP, and stuff like that will become the barrier to entry and will be an unfair advantage for all of you, right? Now, let us also look at, because we started the entire conversation from the point of view that there are a lot of things that can be copied by people, right? So let us also look at what cannot be copied, and it is also very important for all of us to understand what cannot be copied, because as a business, not everything can be copied. There are few things, few areas, few spaces which cannot be copied. So let us also understand what cannot be copied. Number one, nobody can copy your vision as an entrepreneur and also your obsession to build that company. I think that is very, very personal to you. So even people can copy your product, people can copy your feature, people can even copy your marketing style, people can also copy in general things, your vision as an entrepreneur, your obsession towards building that company. And this is the reason why empathy factor kicks in, passion kicks in, right? So this is something which people cannot copy from you. Another very interesting thing which a lot of people kind of do not factor in, but this is very, very important: people cannot copy culture and team, right? So if you are somebody who has built a great culture around your business, who has built a great internal culture, who has built a great value system, who has built a great team, nobody else can take your team unless you do not treat them well. So if you have built a team of rock stars, if you have built a fantastic team, and if you build a great culture in the company, nobody else can copy that. Of course, people can derive the inspiration, but the team will always be there with you, because people in general tend to have the loyalty factor for wherever they're working, and they would want to have the stickiness as well. And last but not the least, again, very, very important thing that cannot be copied or cannot be stolen: customer loyalty and the customer base of your business, right? So, of course, a few customers who are price sensitive, a few customers can always be swayed by giving them fancy discounts and stuff like that. But in general, if your product is so good, the customer loyalty will not be shaken. I can assure you. Forget the competition between Swiggy and Zomato, because there's no value proposition there. But even if you're ordering from either Swiggy or Zomato, you would have one favorite restaurant because you would like their food. So in that case, the food is the value. You would, I can assure you, have a favorite brand of jeans or favorite brand of shoes. Everybody has that, and for a very simple reason: because no matter what the price point is, customers in general, if they like a brand, they have a higher rate of kind of stickiness from the customer loyalty and customer base point of view. So if you are somebody who has built a great loyal, and this of course will come from both pre-sales and post-sale service, and also by delivering an exceptional customer experience, I would say that, right? So customer loyalty and customer base cannot be copied, right? So let us quickly talk about the experience of entrepreneurs, right? So in general, and this is where I want to kind of end today's session, right? So as an entrepreneur, in general, what I have realized and what I've seen, that if you are unable to find your competitive advantage on day one, if you're able to unable to find your unfair advantage on day one, it is absolutely all right. But from maybe today or whenever you're trying to start building a company, please make sure that you start factoring in and start using the framework that I have spoken with you today, and also given the certain points. You can go back and rewatch the video so that you start figuring out what you're really really good at and what is the unfair advantage for you. I'll give you a very simple example. So I don't know how many of you know, but I can assure you, if you're watching this and because you've been following me and my YouTube channel and my work from quite a few time, you would know about this. I run Power Deck, right? And the only reason and one of the biggest reasons why I started running Power Deck is because I figured out and I realized that there's a huge gap in the ecosystem when it comes to pitch deck, pitching, funding, financial modeling, and stuff like that. The point I'm trying to make is that if you are an entrepreneur, and if you bring in certain experience, certain expertise from your previous job or previous exposure to the ecosystem, you will be able to build a far better business. I think I partially spoke about the student example, but let me now give you a deeper insight into what I'm speaking about, right? uh, a lot of times you will see, in fact we have seen the Bansal boys, I think, working for Amazon, the Ola guys working for Uber or similar company. We have seen all successful entrepreneurs working for the some another big company and deriving relevant experience from there. So experience of entrepreneur also becomes an unfair advantage. And if you are somebody who has the domain expertise, who understands the sector pretty well, understand the sector inside out, you can build an unfair advantage for yourself. Now, in a lot of cases, as I said, if you are not the smartest guy, go and hire the smartest guy. If you're able to find and convince the smartest guy to be your co-founder, you by default are smart in your own sector. The point I'm trying to make is, if you do not have the right experience or the sectorial expertise, the smart way is go and hire somebody who brings in the relevant experience. So this is also wherein the co-founder connection and also the mentoring connection kicks in, right? I've already done a video on basics of mentoring and what is all about mentoring, and how to hire a mentor and how to approach a mentor and how to build relation with mentor. I've also already done a video on how to find a co-founder. Go back and watch those videos. I can assure you, both of those videos, finding a co-founder and finding a mentor, will give you a lot of insights as in how can, if you do not have the right experience to build that business, if you do not have the right expertise, if you do not have the right domain insights, if you do not have the right domain knowledge, how can you bring somebody with that area of expertise, with that area of intellect, with that area of knowledge, who can come and build that, who can come and bring that particular unfair advantage for your business, right? So on that note, guys, I will quickly summarize everything that I've spoken about in a few minutes. And then if you have any general further questions, feel free to post them in the chat. And of course, if you haven't liked the video yet, guys, I would request if you can quickly like the video and also subscribe the channel, and also maybe share it with your friends, share it on social media so that the channel grows. Because audience, if you like what we're doing here, of course the word of mouth is very very important for all of us. So concluding everything together, primarily we spoke about unfair advantage. We spoke about how to build defensibility for your business. The reason why we spoke about these two factors is, most of the times you will find investors and incubator managers asking you the question that why can't somebody else copy what you're doing. The only reason why, and I can tell you, anything which can be copied will be copied. Your features, your designs, your graphics, anything which can be copied or is meant to be copied will be copied. You cannot stop that. Do not get into that hassle. Try and build an unfair advantage, right? So the only way it cannot be copied, or you can show that you are better at what you're doing, is by doing it at a 10x level or a higher efficiency level or a delta 4 level, right? Go back, watch how 10x factor can be kicked in into your business, go and how delta 4 thing can be kicked into your business. Now, if you have If you have understood 10x or delta 4, you can only achieve these things by creating unfair advantage. Unfair advantage can be operational supremacy, it can be technical superiority, it can be funding, it can be patent, it can be IP, it can be anything, maybe your net worth, maybe the money you bring on the table, maybe the experience you bring on the table, something that cannot be copied or stolen. That is an unfair advantage. All right. So think about it, and how do you create your own? Just like I initially, or in the previous session, I told you about the SWOT framework, where I spoke about that how can you not only use SWOT personally but also for your business. Similarly, you can use the miles framework, not just for your business but also personally for yourself. Implement the miles framework, think about it a bit. I know a lot of these things will be theoretical or sound theoretical, but when you start putting everything on a piece of paper, when you sit and start writing everything on a piece of paper, you, my friend, will with time become a better entrepreneur. And I think for me also personally, this is the motivation of doing all of these sessions, because when I compile all this information for all of you, when I make these presentations for all of you, I sit back, spend a lot of time in reading, learning, understanding, reiterating, re-going through all the things that I know, and at least it helps me, uh, helps me in making my concepts clear, and eventually it is making me a better entrepreneur. So I hope you are also enjoying this entrepreneurship journey with me. I hope you are also enjoying and learning with me, and I hope that these sessions, these Saturday Night Lives, these episodes that we're trying to do, build and bring enough value for your business so that you also can build a better company and better business. So on that note, guys, I will leave you with your night mood, and I hope to see you next Saturday. This was, technically the last live of January. The first month of 2021 is already over. Can you believe that? So we are already down by 1 month of 2021, and I think till now it has been a fantastic year, at least personally and from the co-design and power tech point of view. In fact, just to update all of you, we just finished the batch one for Power Camp, which I spoke about in the last session, and I think it was a fantastic batch that we did. So yeah, we'll be announcing the next one very soon, and yeah, I will see you next Saturday on the next episode, which one is going to be super fun. So next session I'm going to do is primarily on the smart sales channels. So if you're somebody who's trying to understand how can you get more sales for your business, or what are the smart and new world modern channels that you can explore to build your own business or for your own business to get more customers, attend the next AMA with DNK. And of course, as always, make sure you like the video, you subscribe the channel, and also you leave your comments. After, even if you're watching it later, make sure you leave your comment so that I get an idea you came to watch. So on that note, I'm Dilnawaz Khan signing off. Thank you so much for attending the 27th episode of AMA DNK, Building an Unfair Advantage. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night, and see you on next Saturday. All right. Bye bye. Good night.